order this meeting for November 6th of the Dartmouth School Committee. I'd like to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance if you're able. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Roll call, Kate? Here.
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 Yep.
Thank you. I just want to remind folks that this meeting is rebroadcast on DCTV channels 9 on Wednesdays and Thursdays at 5, Friday at 6 a.m., Saturday 8 a.m., Sunday at 2 p.m. Also rebroadcast on DCTV channel 18, and of course you can find us on Dartmouth High.
YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube. Wow, TV media. Anyway, we begin each meeting where we allot up to 10 minutes for public comment on any item that is on the evening's agenda. So if anyone wants to come speak to anything on the agenda, please feel free to stand up to the podium and just state your name.
This really comes from my daughter and son, but he has too much homework tonight, and she's feeling a little shy. But she is very concerned about styrofoam trays. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I'm Megan Pogash. Do you want to state your name? This is Juniper Pogash, and she goes to DeMello, and she's in 5th grade, and she's been very concerned since at least 2nd grade. Since the pandemic started at the end of 1st grade. She's very concerned about the styrofoam trays, right? What did you used to have?
I used to have the hard reusable plastic ones. They were plastic, and that's not really good, but at least they weren't single use, so that's way better than having styrofoam ones.
Because what happens to those?
When they break down, all the chemicals from it goes into the air and affects our atmosphere and stuff. And yeah.
Our beautiful, pristine waters, land.
Thank
you. And were you concerned about anything else? Plastic bags, plastic packaging?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you
very
so much
much.
for coming and sharing your thoughts.
Really
Okay.
It was very
appreciate it.
brave of you.
Way to go. So do we hear back in some fashion, or?
So
Public comment, we don't usually respond back,
Okay.
but I want to thank you for your advocacy, because we are moving in that direction. I think post-pandemic, things, during the pandemic, things have changed, if you don't. So we're going to get back to that. We've had some confirmation with that in the upcoming, budgeting cycle. So thank you for bringing it to our attention.
And we want to thank Juniper for
So
coming
brave.
up to the microphone. So brave. Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you.
You'll let us know if
Yeah,
she'll
so,
be on the agenda or something?
so
Yes.
typically during public comment, we listen, and then possibly at a later meeting, we can take it up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Great. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask the committee, before we do the approval of minutes, or should we do that first? Okay, we'll do the approval of minutes. We have regular session and executive session minutes for October 16th. They were in our packet, so we'll have to do them separately. So I'll entertain a motion for the regular session minutes for the October 16th meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I will abstain.
Thank you. One abstention. And now for the executive session minutes from that same evening of October 16th.
So moved, Madam Chair, with the stipulation that they be held until the matter for which they were intended is completed.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I'll abstain.
One abstention. Thank you. And our student rep is,
Our student rep is busy getting ready for another performance. The band will be traveling again on Wednesday, so I'm sure she's busy getting ready for that because they're leaving on Wednesday.
So
And
exciting.
just got back
Nice.
Saturday night, so they're on a whirlwind tour.
Sunday morning.
Great. So what I am going to ask is that we shift the agenda a little bit. We have guests from Greater New Bedford Voc School Committee here. We have Superintendent Mike Watson. We have school committee representatives from Dartmouth, Dr. Cindy Marland and Michael Shea here. So if it's okay with the committee, I'd like to move them up to so
fine.
that
Yep.
we free up the rest of their evening. And I just want to preface it with a lot of times we will ask questions of, to check in on Greater New Bedford Voc, and Dr. Marlin had reached out on behalf of the school committee a couple months ago, asking if there were was a time that they could come speak to us, and she was asking what we would want them to kind of present to us, and so Kate graciously put it out to all of us, and the questions, I guess, were forwarded to you, and so
So are we
Welcome
going
them
to
up.
invite?
yes, please.
Mr. Watson, did you want to come up, or the three of you come up to the microphone? I know you had given us a packet and had shared some great information with us, and I want to say Mr. Watson graciously hosted me at South Shore Voc just a couple of weeks ago, and I am incredibly impressed with the work that's happening here, and saw so many things that were just they were so impressive, and I know that many of our Dartmouth students are benefiting from participating in those opportunities. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McGuire. So I know the committee probably wants to speak with our Dartmouth representatives. I'm kind of here just to help fill in and answer any questions. We did want to provide you with a packet of information regarding capital infrastructure projects. I know the committee's had concerns over the Greater New Bedford Voc Tech School Committee minutes, so we have made some adjustments to that. We included our September minutes in your packet. Would have included October, but they'll be voted on next week for us, so I didn't want to do that ahead of where our committee was. We also included some admissions data, which, as Dr. McGuire mentioned when I hosted her a few weeks ago, which is part of a regional effort with all the new superintendents in our region. We're sharing that information both in totality for our 9th grade class, but also individualized for each of our sending districts. So I wanted to include that in the packet for you as well. And then I think one of the most important things that we can do is to showcase some of the work that our kids are doing in our construction trades on behalf of member communities. So I wanted to share some of the projects that we've done just in the community of Dartmouth in the last 5 to 10 years, some more recent than others, but just to make sure the committee was well briefed on that as well.
Thank you.
Again, why don't I start again, Mike Shea. First of all, I want to congratulate, the committee here, the superintendent, and community itself for, as a former parent flag layer downer, whatever you call that person. I did that for my daughter was in the color guard, so that's a secret that not many people knew I did. But congratulations, outstanding as always. As Mike stated, we did pass out early because we wanted to talk about capital infrastructure. I think I don't know if I want to go over something that you've read, if you have questions on it, however you want to, us to present it. I know Cindy's going to talk about the projects very shortly, about what we're doing in Dartmouth to help out our community. But I do want to express the concern that, in the past, it maybe hasn't been a working relationship, but I think Cindy and I are very, very interested in making sure that we are, working with this board, because you have the students up until 8th grade, and some of them go to us in 9th grade, and we just want to make sure that we're listening to you, and we're also trying to react. And we're two different school systems, but I think it's about the kids, and I think as long as we keep that open and there's no egos here or there, we're not trying to do anything special, but if there's a problem, we'll try to address it. And I think the minutes that I know John and I have talked a few times, and you guys were correct in the sense of what we were not doing, and we had some major plans. You prioritize things as you approach this year, and of course some major building issues, not issues, but improvements were going on, and so it took us a little longer to get to where we want. But I think the September minutes explains a lot more. The October ones coming out next week, so again, we'll keep you informed. But I think that's hopefully settled and to the satisfaction of not just you, but to more members out there who are looking at our minutes. I do talk about the capital structure. Mike Watson, Superintendent Watson, has done a great job in the vocational school using a team approach. Everybody's at the table that needs to be at the table. You know, in the past, sometimes only certain people would represent an area. Superintendent Watson has made it very interesting that, you know, you got to have the technicians there. You got to have the facility director there. You have to have, you know, teachers represented. So it's been a great year working this past year in the sense of trying to move forward. And like anything else, I mean, that building opened in 1977. So it seems like a new school, but it's tired at places. And we had used the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 grants this year that Superintendent Watson decided not to put it towards any employment people, because once the grant runs out, then you own them. And so we put most of it, if not 90% of it, into a one-shot deal. Now, let's put it into the air ducts that, and let me get the right, air quality of the school, which some of those ducts are old. We put into the construction of a new health center, which we were outgrowing fast, and with everything going on during the pandemic and like that, we were using a hallway. We used, like probably everybody else was, you know, so we had that money available, and we were using it towards that time. We also had a skills capital grant that helped us with our culinary arts learning space and purchasing new equipment in that area as an HVAC area. So I think it's a smart move of how Mike handled it, in a sense of, you know, as put into the building, put into the one-shot deal, and now the grant ends, but the project will be done. So I can answer some of it, Cindy can answer it, coming back to you. And I know she's going to talk about the project shortly, but again, Mike deals with it every day. He keeps us informed very well. As a matter of fact, he showed us about 6 months ago a 5-year plan of what is going to be needed over the time. And so they're already working on where that money is coming from, where they're going. So to let the people in Dartmouth know that the Dartmouth students that are attending there, they are attending a safe school. They're sending, hopefully, as high-tech as we can. I just read in the paper that Diamond is building a brand-new school for $300 million. Well, we're going to keep our school going on a lot less. And the other advantage that I think people don't realize is that we have people in our building that are in the trade. So as the project goes forward, a lot of the stuff that we hire our students during summertime with our instructors, and so a lot of the welding part, a lot of carpentry, plumbing is huge. You know, they can do all that, and the students are getting their hours and everything towards, you know, their license. So it's a very positive situation. But again, it's a couple of pages there. Any questions from me right now? Or would you like to hear Cindy first on the projects and then come at us?
Let's personally let Dr. Marlin speak, and then we can pop everything. That's just me.
Sounds good. Sounds good to me.
So as you know, service is one of my favorite things. And I'm very proud that Greater New Bedford Voc is out there in our community. They're doing many projects, but I really want to focus on what they're doing just in Dartmouth, really enhancing the lives of people from all different walks, ages. It's quite impressive. One of the projects that they've been working on is District 3 owns a building within Hicksville area. And it's a place where they keep equipment. It's a place that is maintained, but was getting a little bit tired. So the students have been there, and they've been working on the outside of the building, overseen by their teacher and an assistant teacher. So it's very impressive. You can drive by and you can see it's right from the road. The other project that has been going on for a long time but got mixed up with pandemic was the Lloyd Center. And the Lloyd Center, they actually constructed a whole building, right, Mike? Yeah. Yeah, the Welcome Center. And all of it, it was built to be sustainable. As you know, it's quite close to the water. So the kids were working on that for a very long time, but that's been completed at this point. The last piece is the Council on Aging, or what we used to know as the Council on Aging, has been renamed as the Maria Connor Center for Active Living. I don't know if people realize it, but there's only one building that Voc Tech has not built, and that's the main building in that facility. There's a lot of different buildings, smaller buildings, little garages, the Bullard Center, and most recently it was the garages to house some of the equipment and some of the vans, because on the weekends, unfortunately, some of those vans had been vandalized. So it's a place to keep all those kind of things safe. So I'm very, very proud. As you know, I'm really a comprehensive education person, but I just have been very, very impressed with what Voc has been doing and continues to do in all of our communities, not just Dartmouth. Thank you.
Thank you. Turn it over to my colleagues.
Sure. You want me?
So I'll just say, I think, seeing the minutes, they are much better than they used to be. We can actually tell what's going on in your meeting, so I appreciate that. And I also appreciate the admissions data. From my read of it, it looks like you have accepted more students with IEPs, more low-income students, and your student body has become more diverse. It seems to me that's probably the result of the lottery, and I think that's a positive outcome. I think it's a good compromise that there's, some seats that are reward for hard work, but that I know you all offer a quality education and that it's accessible to any student who wants to pursue a trade. So I appreciate that data, and I appreciate the work you've done to revamp your admissions process.
Just quickly on that, because when I get the chance in every form, I want to make sure that I'm transparent with folks. We did make a significant shift, collapsing criteria so that, for example, there's no difference between a 75 and a 95 for students' grades. As I said, I think this data points to some positive changes, but it's incomplete. There are still 300 kids on the waiting list that we do not know today what those kids' student demographic profiles look like. I've been assured by the department we will get that information in December, which makes sense. After you folks submit your SIMS data and our sending districts, they'll cross-reference it with the waitlist data we've turned over to them, and then they'll be able to compile some of this information. So while this is encouraging today, I've told our team, as well as the districts and superintendents that I've been with, it looks good, but there's a key piece of information that's missing. What do the 300 students who did not get in under either the condensed criteria or the lottery actually look like? So we see that data, it'll give us another piece. The committee's already approved the exact same policy for next year, so it'll give us 2 years of a complete picture of that stuff, and I think we'll be in a better position to discuss whether further reforms are necessary.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here, Mike, Dr. Marlin. A couple of things I'll agree, because I have also chirped on the minutes, and I appreciate them. I really do. Mr. Shea and I have had numerous conversations on this type of deal. I also, though it's not here, I also want to compliment you. The sound is a lot better in listening to the meetings and everything else. You can hear everyone, and I appreciate that. If it wasn't, as I get older, it's a lot tougher to stand next to the, have the volume way up next to the television and that.
Maybe we'll have to turn on closed captioning for you.
Yeah, probably, yeah. I think I'm going to have to do that, I'll have to, but the problem is I'll have to figure out how to use that on the television, so that could be a different story. I'm one of the ones that asked about the capital infrastructure, what had been done and everything else, and I was impressed to see this and what has happened, and how you have funded it. That was my main concern, because I knew that there were some projects going on. What's next on the agenda, if I may? And I'm blindsiding you, and I apologize.
You're not blindsiding me. I appreciate the question. So yes, as Mr. Shea pointed out, the philosophy around the grants was primarily one-time money for one-time expenses. We did create a few positions. Family engagement, we have an additional school adjustment counselor. We initially funded our DEI director through the ESSER applications. Those funds have since been moved over to the general operating budget based upon retirements in the last 2 years and positions that we've backfilled. It was a very small number, so it was manageable to do. Primarily, what's been accomplished is about half of the HVAC systems, some of which were nearly original to the school, have been replaced. What we're looking to do this summer is the collision shop will be renovated through a private grant. The plumbing house has been rebuilt. We're continuing to look at skills capital grants for programs that the department deems eligible. That obviously one of our big areas is in legal and protective services. It's not a big, high need in the Department of Ed standpoint, but it is one of our top programs that kids select. They're currently operating out of a few academic classrooms, which is not ideal. But our focus is to try to improve all 27 learning environments in our CTE programs to create modern state-of-the-art learning spaces for those programs. We've made some internal moves where we can. But as Mr. Shea pointed out, and I've also spoken about in these forums, I'm keenly aware of the building conditions in our sending communities. And so we're doing everything that we can to keep this building as viable and strong as it can through the use of grant activities and these skills capital, in these federal relief dollars. So that was the primary focus for us to earmark those funds in this direction.
Okay. And, just to, I'll put my band hat on for a second. Your collision department did a great job with our van when our box truck, when the tree fell on it type of deal a couple of years ago, and that. So, but, thank you for doing that. And I know a lot of other projects that have been done in the area. So, thank you for that. And thank you for this information. Much appreciated.
No questions, but thank you very much. Great information.
Yeah, I want to thank you, Mr. Watson and Mr. Shea, Dr. Marlin. It's certainly appreciative. I appreciate it. I think the committee does as well. Coming out here, having these conversations, being open and transparent, I think is key to building up trust again, or I don't want to say rebuilding it, but improving the trust and relationship between the town of Dartmouth, Dartmouth Public Schools, and Greater New Bedford Voc, because those are our students. I'm thrilled to see, some of these projects. The health center, just briefly, is that for your nurses, or is that an actual shop? Okay.
That is for the nursing staff. We now have 4 full-time nurses, which brings us into compliance with a lot of the DPH guidelines, around 1 for every 550 or so students. What's really cool about the health center is it's hopefully we don't need another pandemic-ready room, but there's isolation spaces, there are lifts for students with disabilities, exam rooms. We even added a lactation space for some of our nursing moms and/or students. Oftentimes that's overlooked in public schools, and so I took the time to make sure Dr. McGuire saw that when she was there. I know our staff members appreciate that, and I think it's just a step in the direction of getting that area of the school set for the next 40 or 50 years. And so we're really proud of that investment, that space, and using the ESSER dollars.
No, I think the ESSER monies were put to good use, and I think it'll benefit the sending districts for sure. One last thing, I'll just compliment the school in general with the projects that you've done in Dartmouth. This is phenomenal work, and I know there's always been cooperation in sending your students over to Dartmouth and Fairhaven and New Bedford as well. But it's certainly a asset to the community. So thank you, all 3 of you. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, I really don't have much to add that my colleagues haven't already stated, but I really appreciate you bringing this to us and really focusing in on the projects that the students are able to do within our own community as well as your other sending communities. Yeah, I mean, they've all sort of spoke to some things that were important to me, and how the lottery impacted the student enrollment and that sort of thing. So thank you for putting this together and informing us on the great work that you're doing. And here's to, a stronger partnership as we, it's all about the kids, as you said, as you began with, Mr. Shea. So thank you so much.
Very welcome. And as always, if you're interested in touring the school, just reach out, and we're happy to make sure someone can take you around to show you all of the parts of things that we're offering students.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Have
everyone.
a great night.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
That was great. Dr. Saban McGuire, I think we'll turn it over to you. I think we have consent
we-
agenda?
We do. We have Dartmouth is the Unified Sports Fundraising. I know that this was in your packet. This is something, again, that I'm learning quite a bit about as I'm going through my first year here as superintendent in Dartmouth. And again, I use the word impressed a lot because, I mean, it's the perfect word to use here. I'm so impressed with the commitment of your faculty in providing our students who are our special needs students and our general education students with opportunities to come together in a way that I think benefits the entire school community and beyond. And so the Dartmouth Middle School is participating in the Unified Sports Program. As you know, that's in conjunction with the Special Olympics, and they're looking to raise money. There are quite a few opportunities that they're investing themselves in addition to grant money that they receive from Special Olympics. And so they're looking to establish a half-day cafe with local restaurants. As a matter of fact, I think I just heard Mr. Nunes talk about what a positive experience that was for him this evening, where he had gone to the Texas Roadhouse, and that was a fundraiser
Yeah,
for
the high school, the different classes, I've been holding one a week type of deal, and tonight was the freshman class, and our grandson's a freshman, so we went to support them. So
And so that seems to be something that's benefiting the entire school community. It seems like every night there's a restaurant hosting some sort of fundraising opportunity for the schools and for the children of Dartmouth. So obviously, they're really wonderful partners to the Dartmouth community. And so they're asking that you approve their fundraising plans here. It looks like they have future expenses around busing, uniforms, stipends, and equipment. And they're adding bocce, which is a sport that I don't know a lot about, but I'm looking forward to learning about.
Great, thank you.
motion to approve.
Second.
The motion, a second. Dr. Jenkins?
So I think this is great, and I have no objections, but as with, in future, this is all new, just I would ask that they would just provide us with the actuals, right, and start to, I know this is a new year, so we don't know how much these things are, but, and I won't be here when they come back to ask for more, but just as a general practice, to include an accounting of what they've raised and how they spent it would be great
And I
in
think
future
so.
years.
You made that point at one of our
Yep.
prior meetings, and I know that.
Yeah, and I know
will-
this is all new, so they don't have any of that yet, so this is totally fine, but I
But
just
Mr.
wanna
Rossi
remind-
is
Yep.
aware.
And in all seriousness, especially, the restaurants, I mean, as I say, if I don't have to shop, cook, or clean, perfect. Would love to seriously support
Yes.
the students and go to a restaurant and have dinner there and support them.
I am all in support of that as well, Mr. Nunes.
Thank you.
Great, so we have a motion, we have a second. Any more discussion? Ready to vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions? No. Passes unanimously, that's great. I'll also turn it to you, Dr. Saba McGuire, for your superintendent's update.
Well, I'm going to start with Mr. Kiley is going to do an update on old business with long-term capital
Oh, so
improvement
sorry.
planning. That's okay. So, but I think it offers us a wonderful segue. I think that's my fault, Ms. Amaral, because last meeting, we moved the superintendent's report up.
You're generous.
Yes. But what a great segue for us to have listened to and heard about some of the wonderful facilities that our students who are attending Social Evoke are afforded that opportunity. And that is the conversation that we're having, part of the conversation that we're having here this evening. I mean, what a great segue. I think we just heard Diamond's building a $300 million facility. We heard about DEI positions, family engagement positions. We heard about modern state-of-the-art facilities for certainly our Dartmouth. Some of our Dartmouth students are benefiting from that, but that provides us, I think, a wonderful segue into talking about what's an important issue here in Dartmouth, and that is long-term planning for our schools. And so Mr. Kiley has a presentation that he's going to go over with you, and I think from if you remember, at the last meeting, we presented option A. Now we have a few more to present to you, and I'm looking forward to sharing this with you.
Thank you, Dr. Saber-Maguire. So, right, we began this conversation, and it was really just really the first time that we had talked about long-term facilities planning since 2017. So, at a school committee level. So it was an important step to begin the discussion, and I'd like to continue that tonight. To refresh everyone in terms of where we've been with this, really sort of modern era long-term capital planning here has been, sort of began in 2016 when the MSBA visited all of our buildings and took a look at all the schools. They kind of ignored the high school because it was fairly new at the time, but they focused on the rest of the buildings. So what they determined at that time was that the middle school was in the worst condition, rated the worst of our schools. It was in the bottom 16% of schools statewide rated at that time. Kind of, so you can rationalize that. They also had some things in their rating system that I wasn't in as much agreement about. They rated Potter and DeMello schools differently. And they're virtually the same school. They were built at the same time by the same designer and contractor. They've been maintained almost exactly the same. So it was kind of interesting that they rated them a little differently. But so that may have been just different folks looking at them and evaluating them. But you know, I think at that time, it sort of began the process that we knew we needed to move forward, and we sought money from the town for a facilities master plan, which we got. And SMMA Architects worked with us in 2017 to develop that plan. There's some good parts of that plan. I think their focus, which was kind of low-hanging fruit, to be honest, was we should close the Cushman School. And I agree that that is the most logical beginning to and goal for any long-term capital improvement plan. It's not, it just doesn't make sense. It's not efficient to operate such a small school that is not in a separate part of the community that would be hard to reach. It's right next to another school. It really doesn't make sense to operate a now 101-year-old building in that fashion. So I certainly agree with that in terms of SMMA. What they did recommend at that time as well was to work on elementary schools so that you could close the Cushman School. It's certainly an option, so we're going to talk about that in a minute. We've had two recent subcommittee meetings in which we talked about, basically, we began by talking about our position, the likelihood that the MSBA might want to be involved with a project here in Dartmouth, the town's possible, ability to be able to operate in a long-term fashion and think about where we need to be down the road, and then we started to consider some possibilities. During our last school committee discussion, we presented an option for discussion, but I will say that in retrospect, I think that may have been a little hasty, in that we focused on one particular project, and I don't necessarily think that no one had made a decision. It was to begin the discussion. So we're going to talk a little more tonight about some other options. The town's long-term capital planning group, I've got to say, it's been very encouraging. So I've been a part of 3 meetings in which the focus has been looking at the town's capacity to borrow and what it would mean to the town to undertake a series of projects. It hasn't happened. I haven't been a part of anything like that in 13 years here. So this is a great step to realize that we need to tackle these projects and consider, at least have a plan in place in which we could attempt to implement along the way. The town does have a great deal of capacity in terms of borrowing when you look at it, and there'll be a lot more talk about that down the road. And they're looking at a 40-year window of projects. So that's going to mean a lot for us since, you know, the ages of our buildings. But the other thing that I thought was very encouraging is that the MSBA has announced that they are going to open up their accelerated repair program, which is great for us because the roof is really struggling here. It's a major problem. So I'm going to be attending that on the 14th, and in the meantime, I've already contacted an engineer who we've worked with before to help us with some of the information that we're going to need in order to be ready to apply when when it rolls out for MSBA. So we're working on that, and we'll keep you posted once I find out more on the 14th. So we had drafted these goals sort of in-house, and in the subcommittee we discussed them and we brought them to the school committee last time, and I think they're good goals, but the school committee can really decide if these are the right goals for us to focus on for long-term capital planning. We focused on providing an effective and appropriate learning environment for all students, pretty obvious one. We need to do that, and we don't have that currently, so it is a goal. Replace our aging buildings in a strategic way that can be supported by the community, so working with the town long-term capital improvement planning committee, the capital improvement planning committee at the town level, the finance committee, select board, town administration, in order to be strategic and figure out a way to roll that out. I think that's our goal there. Impact a broad cross-section of the community. Obviously, we want to, like closing the Cushman School, okay, that's maybe a goal, but that shouldn't be the goal. We need to try and impact as many kids as we can with our plan, and so that's where we included that goal. And then increase opportunities for early childhood education. I think we added a classroom this year in the budget. We had to. We have too many kids, and we're going to have more. And the pandemic has certainly only increased the need of young kids. So that's not going away, and we want to be able to focus on that, and we want to be able to focus on that in a way that's equitable across the town. We understand we're not going to be able to operate full-day pre-K for all Dartmouth students. It's not going to happen, not anytime soon. But we can do is offer opportunities that would be equitable across the town for people to have access and have an ability to send their student to a preschool class, where right now it can be kind of prohibitive. We have a very big town, and we have most of our classes at one school in one end of town. So one of the goals would be to be able to increase opportunities in one way or another, either by increasing classrooms or at least offering access. And feel free to stop me at any time. I don't need to talk the whole time. But.
So can I ask about early childhood education? Because I know, right, it's a real crisis in the state right now, both in terms of access, but in terms of cost. And I agree we're not in any position to offer free early childhood education, but given how much we know about how important sort of early childhood education is to getting students on track, is the barrier cost or is the barrier space? Because if it's space, I think that's an important consideration, and I also think it helps build support for this because so many parents are so concerned about, their private preschool is very expensive. So is it more a cost thing or is it more of a space thing?
I would say it's both. It's both cost and space. And right now, we have the Cushman Early Childhood Center, which is largely for our students that are identified through IDEA. So, I mean, the peers are certainly welcomed in, but we exist because we're supporting the needs of our high-need students.
Right, yeah, I'm just curious as, like, again, we're not gonna offer it for free, but if we offer it if we have the space and we offer it at a reasonable cost, where it doesn't cost the district very much or any money, right, we basically cover the cost, I don't wonder whether a lot of parents would take us up on that, given sort of the crisis that's out there in finding qualified providers, finding safe providers. I know if my kids were that age and I had the option to pay to go to the public schools, I probably would do it, in part because I would have confidence in the ability of the Dartmouth Public Schools' ability to deliver a safe and quality experience for my kids.
There are definitely some opportunities that we can look at, Dr. Jenkins. Having come from, Brockton just this past year, we were involved in a grant, a CPPI grant that partnered the public schools with our community providers. So it wasn't one or the other, it was how could we work together. So I thought that was really important at that time in that community. And I think would be similar here in Dartmouth, where we do have early childhood providers who we'd want to partner with so that they don't see the Dartmouth Public Schools as competitors, but instead as a way that because I think that I know you're 100% right, that we have a real crisis, not only in the state, but across the country in terms of being able to provide high-quality early childhood opportunities for students. And we get, I think it's half the money for a pre-K or age student, and so working within those confines, there's something that I think we could do as a community.
Thank you.
And to sort of reinforce your point of trust, right? You might trust the public school system to be able to do that. Well, even more so if we were able to figure out a way where the preschool classroom that you're going to be sending your student to is in the school that they're going to be going to kindergarten in, and moving on. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there. But so I think it's worthwhile including something relating to that. As to what it actually, how it turns out, there are some different options to look at for sure. I put this in the presentation pretty much every time because I do think, it's important that we understand that our oldest building is more than 100 years old, and that we have 3 buildings from the middle 1950s and 1 from the 60s. And probably our most pressing need is in the one that's only 21 years old, which is the roof. So
They don't make them like they used to.
they don't. They don't. But I do think, as a frame of reference, this is always important for us to consider. So I was thinking when Mr. Watson mentioned, or actually it was Mr. Shea when he mentioned 1977, I'm thinking, I'd take 1977. Would be our second newest building. So, but anyway. So there are lots of options to consider, for sure. And we're going to talk about 3 tonight. There's more things we could do. There's different variations of these options. In subcommittee, we focused on these 3, and I think they're all worthwhile considering. So option A is pretty similar to the one we talked about last time, which was focus on replacing the middle school with a new school, and we focused on a high school. The reason that we focused on that was, well, we'll talk a little bit more about the pluses and minuses afterwards, so I won't get into that too much. But what I did do in this slide was I added the fact that the next project after that building would have to be replacing either the Potter or DeMello school. And then the one after that would be replacing the other one. You're not going to get multiple projects at one time from MSBA. You're going to have to do it gradually. So, it's not like 1955. That's not going to happen again. So, so we'd have to have a plan in place. And then the Quinn School would also be towards the tail end of that. Remember, we're looking at a 40-year window. We have to spread these projects out. So that's what we would be looking at, option A.
Can I ask a question
Yes.
about that? When after last meeting, I heard people, the question that I got, can you explain how would the middle school project work? People are like, there's not a lot of space there. Like, does the middle school close while you're building a new building on the site? Do you build it? That was the most common question. Like, people were just trying to figure out, like,
Yeah.
how does that work? Because that middle school is in use right now. So
Yeah.
maybe could you explain that?
Yeah, I think the way it would work would be,
And we're not going to hold you to this, but
yeah,
just sort
that
of
the high
ish,
school,
right?
right, that the high school would be built immediately behind the middle school.
Okay.
Or, actually,
Somewhere
option
around
A or C
Right.
would work the same way.
Okay.
So there would be a building built immediately behind. It is somewhat challenging.
Yeah.
It causes problems.
Yeah.
But this is a messy situation that we need to rectify, so we'll be prepared to deal with that. It would likely be built so that it would be somewhat lower than Slocum Road in terms of the main entrance, because there is a fair drop on Hawthorne Street between the middle school main entrance height, let's say, Slocum Road height, to where the baseball field is in the back. I don't think it would need to be built all the way down to where the baseball field is. Could be built up, and then the land could be adjusted somewhat so that you'd have like a logical entrance into the building. So a middle school or high school, option A or C, would
So
likely
the
be
middle
that
school would
way.
remain open during construction?
It would have to. I mean, we have no other option.
That's what I was
Yeah.
just trying to wrap my
No
brain
other
around it,
option.
and a couple people asked me that. So I thought
Definitely
I'd-
not without some challenges. I mean, but on the other hand, I mean, I've personally lived through, major renovation while kids are in a building. So it can be done. I mean, that's rough. This is a separate building at least. So there's not a lot of room to move around there, but we would figure it out and make that happen. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Mr. Oliver.
I had a question, Mr. Kiley.
Yeah.
And my apologies if this came up at the last meeting. I didn't get a chance to rewatch the video. What would MSBA be willing to commit to as far as, do they have, and maybe you'll talk about this after you attend the meeting that you're going to, but what would MSBA be willing to commit to? Do they have stipulations as far as what they would prioritize over what the school committee wants? Like, can we go to them and say, this is what the school committee and the town is looking for? And,
Yeah, I mean, so for instance, if we went to them and said, we want to renovate the middle school, they would say, no, we're not going to do it. Because it's from 1955, the cost to renovate versus build new doesn't make any sense. You wouldn't get your bang for your buck in the end in the project. Certainly they will be driving the bus because they are paying 50%. Right. And they will hold that over our heads until we comply with what their wishes. However, I do think that communities that are prepared to move forward and that they have confidence that will fund projects, they'll listen. They want to do successful projects. In subcommittee, we talked at our first meeting a lot about MSBA projects. And it's funny because following that 2016 MSBA survey, you would think that all of the projects following that would be targeted at the worst-rated schools. They were not. They were targeted at communities where they were ready to do projects. And some of them were not really rated very low, the schools that they were getting projects for. Quite surprising, really, when I looked, because I looked at every project that they've done since 2016. and looked at the ratings of the buildings and how old they were and the size of the buildings, and was it related to overcrowding or things like that. There wasn't a lot of overcrowding because Massachusetts population's declined, but so there wasn't a lot of direct correlation to the building rating for what they approve. So what I believe is that they will approve things that they think are going to be important to the community. So I'm sure that we could put in for something and they could say, we don't like that idea. They could do that.
Okay.
Our hope, so I had a discussion with Chris Markey, who had offered to set Dr. Saber McGuire and I up with somebody from MSBA to talk to about this. I think what we're going to do is go to that, attend the meeting on the 14th, find out, okay, what's the groundwork that's going to need to be done for the high school roof, and any other information we can find out about how they're going to open up their projects, and then hopefully sit down with somebody from MSBA and say, are we off base here thinking this?
Is this in the realm of possibilities?
Yeah. But, so we have that MSBA, obviously, we need MSBA funding to do these projects, but we also need to be cognizant of trying to be a part of what the town is putting together for the long-term capital plan, which is moving pretty quickly that they're working on that. So I want to have, we want to be going in both directions at the same time, for sure.
I have some more questions, but I'll hold off.
Okay. So option B is to look at elementary schools first. So basically, you just take what we were talking about in terms of replacing the middle school and moving it down the list. So you'd move the Potter or DeMello schools up and do those, and then once those were done, you'd be able to close the Cushman School, you'd be able to rework things, and then you'd focus on the middle school and the Quinn School following that.
So in step 4, the middle school stays the middle school, or the middle school
Probably.
becomes the high school?
It probably stays the middle school because the problem you're going to have is it's not quite as flexible because, building a high school would then allow this to be a middle school, right? It may not be as likely that MSBA, after building 2 brand-new elementary schools that we have grade 5 in, would then say, oh, okay, that's fine. We're just now going to build you a middle school with an extra grade, even though we just built the elementary schools 10 and 20 years ago with those grades. It probably wouldn't work out that way. So most likely it would just be a middle school, I would think, at that point. Not just, it would be a great middle school. So something to think about for sure. And then replace the Quinn School at the tail end. I think that's the kind of common denominator, most likely. Option C would be you tackle the middle school. And I think this has merit too. You could have some flexibility and you could look at 5th grade at that point. And I think you could come up with a pretty good justification of why that might make sense. The whole redistricting and closing the Cushman School could kind of slide around depending on the approach you took with number 2, replacing the middle school. So it gives you a little more flexibility that way. But then you'd be back to, okay, now we've got to choose which one, Potter or DeMello. Obviously, we've talked internally about how you might choose that, and you obviously have to think about the situation in that particular area of town and what you need to focus on in terms of available property that could be built out, the current enrollment, and so forth, and try and figure out what direction to go in terms of those. But that's also a little while down the road, so things change, of course. And then replace the Quinn School. So those are kind of 3 options that we considered. I mean, I considered others, but I couldn't come up with another way that made enough sense to put it on paper as an option D. But I'm open to suggestions, and if anybody else has anything else they want to think about in terms of the order of operations, we absolutely can talk about that. So these are more like our thoughts than they are your thoughts, right? You haven't had a chance to talk about this, so I don't want to dominate this part of the conversation, because I think what we're going to look at here and hope for in the fairly near future, and it doesn't have to be at this school committee meeting, but at some point in the near future, we're going to really need some preliminary direction that we can go back to the long-term planning committee with and say, hey, we're really thinking that this is the direction that we want to at least put on paper for the moment and see what it looks like in terms of town borrowing down the road and how it would fit into the next 40 years. So, I mean, I put some advantages and disadvantages, but, and I'll go through them, but again, it's more up to how you folks perceive these projects than how I do necessarily. Option A, it has the most impact immediately. You know, it impacts high school kids, middle school kids, elementary kids, preschool kids. It impacts everybody. I think that placing our sort of center of our school community at the center of the community has a lot of benefit. I think that, you know, we just saw that in your packet tonight that you have 400 students, Dartmouth students attending Greater New Bedford Regional Vocational Technical High School, right? So for us to be competitive, we need, you know, this would make sense, right? This would be a competitive advantage.
Could I hop in for a minute?
Of course.
In regards to what you were just saying, Mr. Kiley, and maybe this is for Dr. Saban McGuire as well, does Dartmouth High School currently have any recognized innovation pathways that the state recognizes right now? And if not, why don't we, and is space an issue?
I know that we don't. We have the former principal here who can talk more about that. I would say space is definitely an issue. I mean, right here, we have a band that doesn't have enough space for practice within the building. So we know that space is an issue in this physical building right now.
Right.
So
I guess I vaguely remember at some point sitting at this table with Dr. Gifford talking to us about innovation pathways. And I don't know where that was left, but I'm just curious. And because certainly this leads into why we would need more space or a different type of space. Because at the end of the day, we're all elected and we represent the community. So it's important to have these, I think, have these questions answered in order so we can properly answer them from the community members.
do you want to talk about where you were with this?
Space is definitely an issue with this building. That's not the only reason why we don't have innovation pathways, and we are actually we've had some meetings already this school year to start building innovation pathways. It's going to take partnerships between our schools, public universities in the area, and so we're starting those conversations. We've met a couple of times with partners from Brockton Public Schools to see. It's about a lot of these programs are about bringing them to scale as well. High school Dartmouth size doesn't always have the number of students to fill multiple pathways. You can't be all things to everyone, right? So partnering with, Brockton Public Schools and, public universities would allow us to offer more for our students, but it would require that partnership so that we could fill out programs. But certainly space is part of that equation as well, depending on what innovation pathway you end up pursuing.
I think the other important thing, though, to bring up is we heard Mr. Watson say that there is a 400 student wait list to get into South Shore Voc. So obviously, there are students that are interested in attending a school that has those kind of opportunities,
Right.
and we don't have them here in Dartmouth. So that, again, speaking to the competitive advantage, if we're able to offer some of those opportunities, we'd be able to keep more students in district.
Right, exactly. And it's my understanding that the innovation pathways, we can't, in order to get the funding, we can't offer a pathway, like a shop pathway that New Bedford Voc has, correct?
Unless they can't accommodate our students.
Right, right.
And if there's a wait list, then there seems to be some opportunity.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry for interrupting.
Don't be sorry. Please feel free. And it also, in addition to that, would distribute preschool across the town the fastest, right? We'd be able to move fifth grade into a middle school setting and then adjust accordingly at the elementary level following that. So there's some advantages there. I do think there's a significant disadvantage, and it is that it would be the most expensive project. So building a new high school these days, like we were just talking about Diamond at $300 million. Ours might not be that much, but it would not be an inexpensive project by any means, and it would clearly be more expensive than the other projects that we're talking about, the other options, B and C. So, you know, the elementary option is it's least expensive, move it up front. It actually would be more expensive than C overall because of the time value of money and escalation costs over time. You know, building an elementary school first would be the least investment that the community needed to make early on in the process. So that is, you know, obviously money matters. It would, you know, positively impact a portion of the town's youngest learners right away. So those kids, I would think, would benefit from that project immediately, and then hopefully their whole academic career would be set on a, you know, higher trajectory because of it. So I think that's a positive too. I do think that it's difficult to decide where you go first in that scenario. You have two schools that, you know, are equivalent, so you need to pick one. So it does take multiple projects to implement, you know, be implemented in order to impact families townwide. So it would also take multiple projects to close Cushman, I would think. There are ways around that, but I don't think it would be the right way. So I think it would take multiple projects to get to that point. And it's not quite as flexible like we talked about in terms of option C, where you have the ability to then possibly adjust the middle school size and sort of implement some other changes, like being able to close the Cushman school and provide pre-K throughout town with option A or C. You wouldn't really be able to do that with B up front. So option C is actually the least expensive of all the options, because over time, it would be cheaper to build a middle school certainly cheaper to build a middle school than a high school, and it would be cheaper to build that first and get it out of the way, and then build the elementary schools after that. So that is kind of, you know, and a little more flexible, obviously. So, you know, I think when we're looking at this, well, I'll let you folks talk about it and see what you think, rather than me make conclusions.
So, in terms of most expensive, least expensive, eventually this gets paid in the form of repaying the loan, which gets paid by the taxpayers. So that loan will be paid over a great number of years. I, as the taxpayer, would say, well, how much would I be paying for Plan C versus Plan A? Because A does seem like it would make a lot of people very happy if it had nothing to do with money. And if there wasn't that much difference in my taxes between A and C, I would go with A. If there's a big difference, C. So I would want to know that.
Yep, yep. And we'll talk a little bit about next steps, but I appreciate that feedback, and we'll talk more about that.
Dr. Jenkins? and Mr.
So
Woods.
for me, I think B is my least preferred option. I think the middle school is our worst school, and that's not in terms of the people or the just students or the education, but the quality of the building, that is in the greatest need. And I can remember, I think we were actually sitting in Quinn School doing an executive committee meeting, and it took way longer than it should have because I couldn't build a bridge over the fact that the architects recommended the elementary schools over the middle school. And so I think I puzzled that out loud with you all for 45 minutes until everyone was ready for me to shut up. So I can't support a plan that puts that really last. I think our students need that most. I agree with that's about the question about what is the cost. I think we need to know, and we know that these are not going to be hard estimates, but in order for us to make an educated decision, we need to know ballpark what that difference is going to be. 100 million, 10 million, those are two very different numbers. My other concern as we think about this is the politics of it, right? These are going to be overrides, and what if we blow it all on the very first building and the town never says yes again? Right, and so if we put the middle school last, then I deeply worry that that's it, that's all we get. I've been involved in these campaigns long enough to have that worry me. So yeah, we're developing a 40-year plan, but there's no guarantee that the town's gonna say yes, because unless I'm wrong, it's gonna require repeated asks going back to the town, right? So I think we need to think about that, right? What, if we're only gonna get one, which is a high probability in this community, what's the one we want? So yeah, I think those are my sort of initial thoughts, but I definitely, probably because of the political risk, I'm not willing to put off the middle school. Whether we build a new middle school or build a new high school, I'd wanna see costs associated with that. But me personally, I don't want to wait.
Mr. Nunes?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Colley, Dr. Saber Maguire, when you look at replacing the Potter and the Mellow schools type of deal, what are we looking at or do you have an idea as to what the size of the school would be for the number of students type of deal? I mean, I think right now they're like a 500 capacity, give or take, if my memory's any good.
And we have some blips in enrollment in the last few years where we've seen a fair amount of decline at the DeMello School, where we're under 350 students presently. So, I mean, it's been a pretty dramatic decline in that building. So obviously that plays in. MSBA is not going to build a school that is thinking, 30% bigger than what the current enrollment is. I'm sure they're not going to do that unless they have a good reason for it. We do have some factors in the community that may play a role. Obviously, the closing of the Cushman School can play a role in that. We do house currently kindergarten at the Cushman School in addition to preschool. So those are factors that need to be spread out throughout the community. So depending the order of operations that you were to do these in, you'd be factoring that in, and MSBA would too. Also growth in the community. I don't know. I mean, the rail is just about here. After decades of not being of talk. So, how that impacts our student population, I'm not sure. So there are other things, and we're actually working on getting some census data, some help with that to get a better look at it, more scientific look.
And I guess if you look at this as a 40-year plan, you've got 5 schools, that we're looking at, 3 elementaries, middle and high school. It's almost like one project every 8 years if you spread it out that way. So, does it have a chance? Who knows? But, that's the way I look at it, type of deal.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, it's been done in other communities, but obviously it's a challenge. And just to clarify, it's a debt exclusion, right? It's not an override, a little
Debt
different.
exclusion.
It's for a defined period of time. It's for however long the period is. Typically for a school construction, it would be a 20-year period, although that now you can extend that to a 30-year. You used to not be able to do that. But you can extend it to a 30-year. So essentially, you're taking a 30-year mortgage versus a 20-year. That's not necessarily going to be up to us to decide that, but those are options that are out there, for sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome, Mr. Oliver.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So for me to really wrap my head around this and make a recommendation at some point when we're ready down the road, I would love to see some kind of survey go out to the community to just get a taste of the appetite for the citizens in this town as to, and this committee or administration can certainly work on the facility subcommittee work on some of the types of probing questions. But to me, I think we represent the community, so it's important for us to really see, because at the end of the day, right, we're going to need to sell this. We're going to need to sell this to the community. So I think it's important that we engage the stakeholders in town, and just to, for not anything else, just to hear what they have to say and what their thoughts are, and whether maybe we put out these options to them. Obviously, at the end of the day, it's the school committee that's going to vote on moving this forward. So, I think that's at least a start for me. In addition to that, Mr. Kiley, I'd be curious as to what are we looking at? Like Dr. Jenkins said, estimates rough, whether it's, ballpark of 200 million versus 150 million. And then I would be interested in seeing the actuals on the debt exclusion for, for $100 million versus $150 million and what the taxpayer would pay.
We can provide that for sure, yeah.
You get you one building. Maybe.
Oh, right.
Maybe.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right?
I'm just using examples.
Maybe we should use bigger examples so we know that
So
over the
200 million, 250 million.
Yeah.
But those are large numbers,
Yeah,
and
they are, for
it
sure.
certainly scares people.
But remember that the town's share would be approximately 50%.
Right.
Depending on if it were a model school, there's a little extra reimbursement from the state depending on the level of efficiency of the new building. There might also be some percentage points available to us for, like, if, for instance, we were to try and, like, the new thing is, in new school construction is trying to get to net zero. I don't know. But
Right.
that could be something that where the state would also invest a little more in our buildings. But yes, we can work on, that's kind of in my next steps is, I really want to hopefully have some direction, and I think I'm getting that in terms of where we need to head. And in terms of the long-term capital planning committee, I think the beauty of that is that this is basically they're waiting for us to say, like, what are the scenarios that we might be considering so that they can see what it would look like in terms of the impact on the average home value, average taxpayer and so forth. So I think they're ready to do that work with us, so that's encouraging.
Dr. Jenkins?
Well, I think Chris is right. We need to think about what the community, is interested in. At the same point in time, I think we have to be flexible about this because we are thinking about the community as a whole. And if the town has something like, I don't know, we need a new water plant or something, I'm not saying that we do, but that's really expensive and that needs to come first because it affects the health of the community, then maybe we do. So it may be that we don't end up recommending one, but we rank the options because I think, again, we do want to work in partnership with the town. We're not the only capital needs in this community, and if we have to move things around in order to come up with a plan, I think we should be flexible, and we should be prepared to be flexible in that way.
Right.
Yeah, it's a great point, and I've got to say, like, right from the start with that long-term capital planning committee, the discussion was, no one was entrenched. So it was, yeah, there are other needs, we know that, like, I know that, everybody there understands that there are other things that are also important, so it's not a fight. This is about creating something that's meaningful for the community moving forward and understanding that there are going to be priorities. And,
Right.
and let's face it, a 40-year capital improvement plan is not going to end up being exactly what you
Right.
put down on paper, and we all understand that. One thing that, might be of interest is if the committee were interested in having one of its members come to the long-term capital planning committee, we have had some other members of appointed boards there, and I've been representing the school committee, but I'd be happy to have one of you, and I don't know whether it's a member of the Fields and Facilities Subcommittee who'd be interested, or any of you. I'd be happy to have you there at those meetings with me and, assisting and offering your input. And the next one is next week on the 15th, so.
Can we also, to follow up
9 in
on
the
Mr. Oliver's suggestion of a survey, maybe we might want to work with the town? Like, I could envision something where we asked about schools on one page, other needs on another page, and then the third page is, like,
That is
you're
good to
moving
offer them.
around and you rank them, right?
Yeah.
So, because there's no sense in doing two separate surveys.
Right. And
I
we
could
would
certainly bring that to the committee next week, to that, it's not a committee, the long-term capital planning, whatever you want to call them.
Ad hoc
Group. And offer that up. That would be a great suggestion, I think.
So I'll just close with, I think obviously bringing the high school back to the center of town would be beneficial in a lot of ways, but I also am very cognizant and recognize the difficulty of this building even being built, and how hard people fought for this building. It's tough. It's tough to make one decision over another right now at this time. So that's all I have.
Thank you. I agree with everyone's contribution to this discussion. Very thoughtful, so thank you. I just wondered, in my notes, what others haven't really asked, I guess, when you talk about like a difference in cost between building a middle school and building a high school, I'm thinking about the discussion earlier around, not necessarily per pupil space, but per activity space, per 21st century learning space, per innovation, pathways, and all of the, things that we really want our students to have access to or strive to be a part of, from look forward to being part of this community moving forward. We talked about the band not having enough space and the competitive nature of everyone fighting for space in our, between the track or indoor, courts and that sort of thing. What is the difference? What are the things that make building a middle school less expensive than building a new high school?
It's a good question. First of all, typically, a high school is a larger building than a middle school, just based on enrollment, right? You usually have three grades versus 4, although we may not be seeking that, right? So that would have some impact. But it is also based on programming, right? What we have in this building that we utilize versus, of course, our middle school was a high school, so there's quite quite a bit of space in there that you might not have in a normal middle school. But it's based on the programming that we offer and the variety of programming that we offer. And, I think it would be, hopefully, significantly more advanced than this building if it were a new high school. But, I think what might be helpful, I can see construction costs have been problematic. And there's not a lot of new buildings because the MSBA can't afford a lot of new buildings, right? These projects have been so expensive that they had to shelf roof repairs, right? And say, we can't do roof repairs anymore because the other projects are eating up, the things they had already committed to were eating up all the money. But what I can do is share some of the current projects throughout the state and begin to get an idea of, they're not necessarily going to be exactly similar to this project, but of the magnitude. And the ones that I've seen, it's been fairly significant, the difference between a high school and a middle school. But it's significant, and then we pay half of it. So it's a little less significant then, but still it's going to be a decision to make, for sure.
And I really appreciate Dr. Jenkins thinking a little bit more about surveying. I wrote public hearing, and then Chris said survey, and doing it together.
That was Chris's idea.
Oh, sorry, Chris.
Give
But
credit to him.
in conjunction with adding on, making sure that we're being mindful of having it be part of a
the other
larger
departments.
surveying
That was
of
Shannon.
all of the proposed projects for this 40-year plan when I'll be 90. And actually, if you could speak about the timeline of any project, I'm talking about me being 90 in 40 years, but we're talking about hopefully impacting, doing all of it right, least amount of money, largest impact, bang for our buck, all of that. But the reality is, whatever we roll out, what is the time frame?
Yeah, I think, best case scenario, like all this just falls into our lap and the state has no other projects and they really want to do something here. I would say that it would probably be 4 years before a building could be constructed, at absolute minimum, best case, right? And it likely would be more than that. We got to be realistic. It would likely be more than that. So it's a ways off. We're not even at, we would need to be ahead of where we are. We don't even know what the state is doing yet for MSBA. So once we know that, we'll have a little bit of better idea of timeline, whether we could move a project forward this year. I don't really even know if that's realistic. It might not be. So that would push it out a year. And then there's feasibility. If we were to be lucky enough that MSBA wanted to work with Dartmouth, which again, I think that we have some favorable, they haven't done, first of all, MSBA has not done a major renovation or construction project with Dartmouth. This building was not part of the MSBA program. This was part of the Department of Ed's SBA program. It was one of the last buildings built under that program, and they went out of business after that. So I think that we might be a candidate. We have borrowing capacity. We have very low debt in this town, extremely low. So compared to other communities. So we are set to, be a candidate for projects, and maybe that would make us attractive. But I do think that if we were lucky enough, then there would be a feasibility study period that would take a while, like maybe a year. And then there would be a design, hopefully, that follows that would then take a year to design. And then construction would take a few years, a couple of years probably 2 years, depending on the size of the building.
Yeah, that's very helpful because that really tells the story of it's not just, we could survey the students to see their best, the dreams of what their school might look like, but this really is going to impact our really young new families in the community.
Exactly.
To say, if they're planning to, if they're young family and their little infant might be utilizing one of our new buildings by the time they're of age and in school. So it's really important that the community recognize that that's part of the whole equation. Mr. Nunes?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, just to follow along on that timeline, you're looking at, for discussion purposes, students that are in second and third grade at this point in time, maybe, if, the stars all align, as they say, being able to walk into a new high school type of deal, and then, students, other students being able to, move into a middle school and all, that type of deal. So there's a lot of, that's a positive aspect of it type of deal. But that's where, it's those students there that are the ones that, we have to be looking at and is going to be, on the front burner.
Yeah, and I mean, just now, the public construction industry hasn't recovered from COVID. I mean, we're getting some timeline shocks with looking at, 80 to 100 weeks for certain types of products in public construction. Like, so that's like if you order it, you get it in 2 years and then you can start building it. So even after we go through all that, just the backlog in ordering has been, I mean, I hope it comes down sometime soon because, right, you can't get anything done.
Yeah. For sure, it's certainly a challenge, but certainly worthwhile considering. So I appreciate all your input there. That is very helpful. A few other things that we just need to think about, though. Depending on the approach you take, the Dartmouth Memorial Stadium, something that should be, I was
This
just
is where
there.
my fears
I was there
about
Friday
starting
night with lots of
projects
other
and not
people, and
finishing
it
come from.
yeah, it still needs some work, by the way. It was $6 million. Our bid came in, and we obviously don't have that. So, but something that should still stay on the radar. In terms of renovation of this building at some point way down the road. Yeah, you have to think of that too. And then, depending on what you choose, lots of other things need to be maintained, right? So the HVAC systems in the buildings, the windows, the roofs, the athletic fields, the security, fire safety, technology, all of those things are things that are going to have to be maintained. And depending on how this process looks and ends up being implemented, we're going to have to face those. For instance, I was part of the Quinn roof project. Well, that was right when I started, and it's going to have to be replaced in like 18 years. So it might have to be replaced even if it's on this list in the 40-year window. It might have to be replaced. DeMello and Cushman's about 19 years out, most likely. It'll need to be replaced. Potter about 20 years from now. And the Dartmouth Middle School, if we don't target that project, will need to be replaced 20 to 25 years down the road. So lots of other things are more pressing need than the roofs, but those are big projects, the roofs obviously, in terms of like windows and doors, HVAC and so forth. Those things, we're going to have to tackle some of those things before then, but things to think about. So we've had some discussion tonight, I think some good discussion. We've talked a little bit about prioritization and things to look at, but I do think that we can bring back to that long-term capital planning committee some ideas and get some more information from them, and I can do some more work in terms of research and cost estimates and so forth, and bring some more information maybe back to the subcommittee first and then back to you folks. And then to Chris's suggestion and Mr. Oliver's suggestion, in community awareness. We need to first gauge, what the appetite is in the community, but then also keep them aware of the process along the way and try and build support. So, but
Those
So I
are,
think the wonderful thing is that you obviously all just named all of our next steps as part of the discussion that we just had. So thank you.
Mr. Nunes?
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, and just going, excuse me, just going back to other considerations with the renovations and the stadium and everything else is the fact that, you know, as I mentioned at the subcommittee is, you know, the turf field's already, you know, has a life of about 15 years, give or take, depending on how much it's used, et cetera, like anything else. You know, it's 4 years in already, and, you know, in 11 years, that's gonna have to, we're gonna have to look at getting that fixed.
Yep.
And replaced.
That's for sure.
So.
Yeah.
Never-ending battle.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
And so now I will turn it over to
Yes,
Dr.
for the
Saber McGuire
superintendent's
for the
report.
superintendent's
Thank you so
report.
much. So
How about
first,
MCAS?
Yes.
Mr. Nunes, we are going to talk about MCAS.
Sorry, my fault. Not that I'm looking to,
I thought I missed again.
I missed one. I apologize.
So, I know we had
Not that I-
mentioned this at an earlier date, that overall, we're pleased with the MCAS scores. We certainly saw significant growth, moving back toward what some consider to be pre-pandemic student achievement. And at the same time, I think it's important that we recognize, and I think you'll see in the presentation, and Mr. Thibault's going to join us, but I think what you're going to see in the presentation is that there's still work left, right? We always have the work in front of us. We haven't fully recovered from the pandemic, as people refer to it as the pandemic slide. And Mr. Nunes, with that in mind, MCAS is only one measure of student achievement. And so we'll talk about other things that we're truly celebrating here in the Dartmouth schools, but MCAS is one measure, and it is an important measure for us as a school community. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Thibault, and he's going to give you an overview. Again, this is a district overview of how the community of Dartmouth fared this past year.
Thank you, Dr. Saber McGuire, and thanks to members of the school committee. I'd like to say you saved the last presentation for the last presentation for the best, but it's MCAS, and so it is what it is. So as Dr. Saber McGuire said, this is really a high-level kind of district overview of how we fared on MCAS in 2023. But I always like to start with reminding folks what MCAS is and why it's important. And so MCAS is a comprehensive assessment system that is used to measure how our students are doing on grade level standards, and for ELA and mathematics that occurs from grades 3 through 8 and then again at grade 10, and for science, technology, and engineering that's at grade 5, grade 8, and then at the high school, which for Dartmouth High School occurs for most students after 9th grade, and that's biology is the exam that most of our high school students take. Why does MCAS matter? One reason is it's one measure, as Dr. Saber McGuire said, it's one data point that shows how our students are progressing in comparison to other students across the Commonwealth. But at the high school, it also takes on some added weight because it's in part used to determine whether or not students graduate with a high school diploma. And so it takes on a little bit more weight at the high school level. This slide might look familiar to most folks who were on the committee last year when we presented. We purposely included it again this year because I think it's important to frame our MCAS results in the context of what occurred during COVID-19. Learning loss is definitely a very real thing. The impact of COVID is a very real thing. When the Department of Ed held their conference call earlier this year, they actually framed it around trying to get back to the pre-pandemic achievement levels and performance levels. And so that's 2019, so 4 years ago already. But it's just, I think, important to note that although COVID is over, we are not back to normal, right? I know that folks would like to think we are. We all wish we were, but we really have a long road of recovery ahead of us. in terms of how disruptive the pandemic was to student learning. So some trends across the state for Massachusetts. The Department of Ed was cautiously optimistic that the pandemic slide or the pandemic slide was halted, particularly for ELA and math. And they also noted that STE results, science, technology, engineering results were fairly unchanged, but that there were some slight declines overall in STE as well. But the biggest takeaway, I think, from the state's conference call earlier this year was that our youngest learners, who were probably most impacted by COVID, they're just starting to enter the testing, the MCAS window. So our grade 3 results that that were included in this data, those students were in kindergarten when the pandemic began. And for our current third graders who are just going to take MCAS for the first year now, they entered kindergarten during that hybrid year, that year that was also very disrupted. So we're going to see the impact of COVID in our data for several years ahead. And it just, again, I think is a cautionary tale for us all to be mindful of. Even though the pandemic is in the rearview mirror, its impact is not. It's very much, it remains with us. Some trends for Dartmouth Public Schools in terms of ELA. Well, I guess I would just say overall, Dartmouth, as Dr. Saber-McGuire said, performed strong in comparison to the state, as we typically do. So that's certainly something to celebrate and be proud of. We have significantly more students who are in the exceeding or meeting expectations performance level in ELA and math in comparison to the state. And we also have significantly lower percentage of students who are not meeting expectations on those exams as well. And that's true for grades 3 through 8, as well as grade 10 in ELA and math. And in terms of STE, we slightly exceeded the percentage of students meeting or exceeding expectations in grades 5 and 8, and we were just below where the state performed in terms of meeting and exceeding expectations at the high school level. This chart here kind of gives a high-level overview, not just of our exceeding and meeting expectation students, but of all the performance levels. And again, as a reminder, or for those of you who maybe aren't as familiar, the performance levels are exceeding expectations, meeting expectations, partially meeting expectations, and then not meeting expectations. And so obviously we want as many students as possible in the upper two categories of either meeting or exceeding. And that's really our focus every year, is to try and grow all students and kind of help move all students to the next category performance level, if you will. Another measure on MCAS that's often overlooked is student growth percentile. And this is a measure to determine whether or not students are growing in comparison to peers who performed similarly on the previous MCAS. So typically, we'd like to see between 40 and 60. That's considered typical growth. Obviously, we'd love to see high growth, which is 61 to 100. You can see from this slide that Dartmouth falls into that typical growth category across the board for grades 3 through 8, as well as grade 10. And if you're wondering why science doesn't have SGP listed, it's because the state does not calculate SGP for science, because it's not given as frequently as ELA and MCAS, which is given in every grade from 3 through 8 and then again in 10. So here's a slide that's really important. It shows that long road to recovery that I've referenced already a few times. And it's a slide that's modeled after a similar one that the state shared with all of the district level leaders. But it really shows the difference between that 2019, that last normal school year, if you will, that pre-pandemic performance, and where we were in 2023. So the bad news is there's clearly significant work to be done to get to the pre-pandemic levels. The good news is, in a community like Dartmouth, we were starting from a high baseline, right? We consistently outperformed the state, so those numbers in 2019 were higher than the state as well. So you know, that's the silver lining, if you will. And you'll note that in grades 3 through 8 in mathematics, for example, that difference is only 1 percentage point. So, you know, great progress in that area. Grade 10 ELA MCAS is, you know, at that 4, -4, so we're in the ballpark there as well. We're going to continue to work hard to make sure that we're closing this slide and reaching or exceeding really the pre-pandemic levels, because that's the ultimate goal. One of the other areas that we really want to look at as well is we want to start to dive into our student subgroups. So this chart here and the next several charts all show, you know, this is ELA, the next one will be math, and the last one is science, but it shows 2 student subgroups. The first one is all students, which is exactly what it sounds like, right? It's how every student in grade 3 through 8 performed. The high needs student subgroup is any student who is a multilingual learner, so any student who ever received ESL services, any student with a disability, and or any student who qualifies for free or reduced lunch, so is economically disadvantaged. And the reason we highlight these subgroups is because our performance, we don't want gaps, right? Our mission statement is a quality education for all learners. We want that to be the case in terms of outcomes as well. And so it's a matter of equity, and so we just want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to, if there are gaps, where there are gaps, to understand why, and to do our best to support all learners. And again, these you know, the breakdown here, this is nothing unique to Dartmouth. This type of data is you know, found in every community across our state and country. All right, so I think it's important as well to kind of look at how Dartmouth compares to similar districts in terms of our demographics. The Department of Ed does this for us by identifying or cohorting us with 10 similar districts. The tool that the state uses is called the DART tool. And so they just they select these 10 districts. These are not districts that we cherry pick. It's the state says, okay, based on enrollment, based on the percentage of students who are high needs students, based on the percentage of low income students that you have, students with disabilities, English language learners, these are the districts that are most similar to you. And that's a helpful comparison for us to see how we perform compared to other districts that are like us. And you can see from the chart that we are Dartmouth more than holds its own against similar districts. In fact, we're above the mean for this group of districts across the board for the most part. But just to highlight some of the areas here, in grades 3 through 8, Dartmouth had the highest percentage of students meeting or exceeding expectations in our DART districts. So that's certainly something to be celebrated. Our SGP in ELA for grades 3 through 8 was also the highest in this DART cohort. And again, that SGP is so important, it shows that all students are learning. So whether students exceeded expectations on the last MCAS or were partially meeting, what have you, it compares our students to like performing students to show how they've grown. For grades 3 through 8 for math, meeting or exceeding expectations, again, highest percentage in our DART district, so more to be proud of there. With SGP for grades 3 through 8 in math, Dartmouth had the second highest in our DART group. For grades 5 and 8 on the STE, in terms of percentage of students meeting and exceeding standards, we are right in the mid-range of our DOT district, just slightly above the mean there. For grade 10, in terms of our ELA meeting and exceeding expectations, we are, Dartmouth High School was the third highest in our DART district. And for SGP for grade 10, Dartmouth students had the third highest SGP as well. I want to just take a second to highlight SGP at the high school level last year was an area that we identified when we presented as a room for growth for us. And I'm proud to share that the teachers, and our students have really done a nice job in this area, and it's reflected here in our data. For math, Dartmouth High School has the second highest percentage of students meeting or exceeding in our Dart district. And then for SGP, again at 49, I know our math teachers were very, pleased when they looked at their data to see that we were right at that typical growth, which again was an area last year that we identified as an area where we could see some improvement. And then finally, for STE, for the high school, we're just below the mean in terms of our performance for students meeting or exceeding expectations on the STE exam in high school. We also recognize that, for members of the community, some of those districts, Triton, for example, I had no idea where Triton was. So I looked it up when I saw it as part of our DOT district, Mr. News, but we wanted to include Bristol County districts so that, people are familiar with Fairhaven and Westport and Somerset and Seekonk and communities that are closer to us. The one, and we're more than holding our own in this grouping of districts as well. The one cautionary tale I would say is probably better to use the median in this group, because we do have Taunton, New Bedford, and Fall River, which are large urban centers, which kind of skew the average, skew the mean. So using the median as a comparison is probably a little more accurate to get a sense of where we fall. But we wanted to include that data for you as well. All right, so I think if I was sitting there, my question would be, so what are we really doing to address the learning loss and to make sure we're on a strong road to recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic? And so efforts to accelerate learning include things like ensuring grade-appropriate instruction occurs at each level in each building every single day across our district. We have a strong commitment to that. We also continue to leverage grant and district funds to provide additional learning, enrichment, and support opportunities. And again, those show up in things like the middle school's after-school programming that we've had for a number of years at this point. It shows up in things like the accelerated academies that we've run during vacation weeks, as well as during the summer. Just this past August, we ran a literacy accelerated academy as well as a math accelerated academy. We were able to service about just under 200 students, and that's intense, several hours of instruction in literacy or math. So we are taking action and leveraging funds strategically so that we can address these challenges. In addition to that, last year, we spent the Curriculum Council as well as the district leadership team updating our district curriculum accommodation plan to make sure that we have clear and effective teaching strategies to support students so that they can access grade level appropriate material. And that's being implemented this year across the district. And again, we continue to focus on high quality teaching and learning. So our buildings have all dug into their MCAS data at the building level, conducted item analyses, really trying to understand, where we outperform the state, where we're maybe not doing as well, and then more importantly, why and what can we do about it? Does it require, curriculum tweaks? Does it, what is it that we need to do in response to it? And those decisions are examined during common planning time and implemented by teachers and building leaders across the district. We're also, Mrs. Paveo and the Curriculum Council worked last year to develop a curriculum review cycle that will be in the process of implementing moving forward. And again, the idea behind that is to make sure that students have high quality instructional materials, across the board. And with that, we'll answer any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Thank you, Mr. Tebow, for the presentation. Certainly, I think it's fairly good news for the Dartmouth Public Schools. Great presentation, and I appreciate all the data. Personally, I like looking at the DART data as well as I appreciate you throwing in the Bristol County data, because I thought, you know, if I'm a family, right, because all this information gets reported out to the state, it's publicly available, and then you have real estate agents and you have other different, USA Today, I think, World Reports, they rank school districts on a lot of this data, and it's good to see that, especially for this area, from a family looking to move into a town in Bristol County, that we're not too shabby. When you look at our grade 10 scores, actually all of our scores, including our SGPs, we're holding our own in Dartmouth for sure. There's definitely some work that could be done. Of note, I'm just curious, looking at the Bristol County information, that I'd love to know what Mansfield is doing and for grade 10 to get those scores of 76 and 75. Just throwing that out there. I'm just curious on their curriculum or something that they're doing. But overall, this is great. I'm proud of the work that everyone is doing here in Dartmouth.
So I appreciate you saying that about, you know, what is Mansfield doing, because that is something we always want to do, is learn from one another in this profession, and we certainly don't show the comparison in terms of for competitive sake, although we are all competitive, I think, but it's more to do exactly what you just said, is to see how we stack up, and if there are lessons to be learned from other districts, we should do that. One of the other points I just wanted to highlight, because I forgot to mention it, is that I do think the return on investment for education in Dartmouth is extremely strong. Mr. Kiley did look at the per pupil expenditure for both the DART and for Bristol County. And Dartmouth was, about 3% lower than the average in those two groups. So I think that speaks to the return on investment, right? Bang for your buck definitely is a strong point for Dartmouth Public Schools, and we appreciate certainly all the support that we get from the community. So,
Thank you, Mr. Tebow.
thank you.
So I'm curious about the additional learning opportunities and what more we need to do. Do we need more teachers, tutors? I'm concerned with our ESSER positions. Is that going to take away from our ability to keep our students moving forward and catching up? So what are the hurdles? Is it personnel? Is it losing those people in the future?
So I think you raised some good points. I think that particularly given the budget discussion that the community is going to be having, I would say now is not the time to turn away, because we know that the needs are going to be here for a number of years to come. And I think it is people and it is personnel that are servicing our students on a daily basis. And I think that's the bulk of our budget, is personnel. So, I think you highlight a very important point.
Those are ongoing conversations that we're having, and I know Mr. Kiley had presented at the last meeting a preliminary
Yeah.
budget presentation, and, we meet about this, I would say, just about every day, and we're meeting with principals right now to have these conversations, and these are the kinds of things that we're talking about. But we have a little ways to go before we're really ready to come forward to the community to talk about what the possible challenges of the implications of the budget could have on the schools. But as Mr. Tebow just said, the majority of our budget is human capital. And so if we're looking at any significant budget cuts, it would be to capital, and we do need people. And the folks, different than what we heard earlier from the VOTEC school, is, they obviously made wise investments with their funds, And I think Dartmouth also made wise investments with the funds, and I've said this before, that at the time, the immediate need here in Dartmouth was for personnel. And you heard them talk about things like they have positions, family engagement. There isn't a family engagement specialist here in Dartmouth. And other things, the capital improvement. I saw their nurse's office, by the way, and it is truly state-of-the-art. And that's for student use. That isn't part of their CTE program. That is really part of how what students are, what they have access to. And it was quite different than what we have here. And that's not a terrible, terrible thing. It's just something for us to look at. But personnel is critical for us.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mr. Tebow. I know we kid all the time, in my opinion of MCAS and such, but I do appreciate this and the students' effort and everything else. I am assuming that you're able to drill down to, you know, the finer points of this with the students and everything else, and, you know, and I don't mean to single out the students, but know exactly, you know, did the student have a bad day? Does the student not test well? Things of that nature, and make adjustments as you go forward with this.
Yeah, so there's a plethora of reports that the state puts out. You can see exactly individual student performance, you can see subgroup performance, you can see based on individual questions and what standards those questions are meant to measure. So that work is typically done at the building level, because every school is different, grade level is different, but yes, absolutely.
Okay. And, as Mr. Oliver said, looking at, both the Bristol County and also the DART that they gave us, that they compare us to, I agree, I kind of like Bristol County better, only because you're looking at a whole bunch of different, and you happen to mention Triton type of, well, if my memory's any good, that's a regional school. So you have a whole bunch of different communities that are in there versus, a Dartmouth or a Fairhaven or, that type of deal. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Dr. Jenkins?
So I agree with my colleagues. I think this is great. I really do think Dartmouth gets real bang for its buck in terms of what we do, what our staff do. But I do want to ask some questions about the science, technology, and engineering scores. That seems to be an area where we're struggling. And I also noticed in particular that the decline at the high school level was from 22 to 23, and it was quite large. And we have science departments. My college is, goes from the humanities and the social sciences, where give us a book and a computer and we're good, to the sciences and engineering, which they're not just human intensive, they are capital intensive. You need lab supplies, you need lab equipment, you need the most advanced technology. I know our science and engineering and technology teachers are excellent. Is any of this a reflection of our inability to keep up with other districts in terms of the technology and engineering and all of that stuff in a classroom that they need for a 21st century education?
So I think there's a lot to the science results in particular. At the high school level in particular, it's only the second time we've given the next generation science exam. So last year was the first year, and then this was the second year. I also think that when we look at, and we had a very preliminary kind of conversation, Mrs. Paveo, myself, Dr. Saber McGuire, when we look at the elementary level, we're very focused on literacy and math and not as focused on science. Curriculum materials need to really be looked at in those areas. All of those things factor into that. The other thing that I noticed was that Bristol County in general didn't do great on the science, technology, engineering exam. So I think that's, there's something to that piece of it as well. I don't have an answer. I wish I did. But I guess, I spoke with Mrs. Larson, our science lead teacher. the biology team at the high school was looking into their data and really doing an analysis. I don't think it's a matter of funding, to be completely honest. I know that our biotech lab, some of our labs, Dr. Bangs has done a very good job leading the science department and making sure our labs are state of the art. A few years back, we had the capital skills grant that kind of, some of those funds were used to strengthen the biolab. So I think it's more a combination of different factors and not just, certainly not the funding piece, I don't believe.
So can I follow up with that too? In your presentation, you noted that our students, and this is my experience with my kids, they take the bio exam. Are there other options for the science, technology, and engineering? And like, how does that work? Are we comparing apples to apples in other communities? Are there multiple versions of the science, technology exam? Have we considered allowing students to take other options if that is a possibility?
So that's a good question. There are multiple versions of the science test at the high school level. Many schools do take biology. Some schools do take a physics first approach. We don't do that. You know, that's certainly something that could be discussed. You know, we have, typically our students, if they do take another version of the science exam, it's because they have to take a retest option and they're no longer in biology, so then we would have them perhaps take a different exam. Other times they retake the biology and we support them either, they might enroll in a marine biology class, assuming they've passed bio, you know, our biology class in 9th grade. So in terms of what other districts are doing, I can't tell you I would have to look that up, but I would say most of the districts are bio.
Yeah, if they're taking different tests, it might be a different sort of comparison, and not that it's different than
Right. Yeah,
math versus math,
correct.
right?
I just want to add to your question too, because I agree, we're looking at we're talking about high school. One thing that Mrs. Pavea, we've all had conversations about that we have not in the district, to my knowledge, and again, 4 months in here, we have not made a significant investment in science resources at the elementary level. So if those resources aren't there, I mean, we can't fault our educators for not teaching science with the fidelity that we would expect, and we can't expect students in 9th grade to be able to learn everything there is about science in their freshman and sophomore years of high school. And I know Mrs. Pavea wants to talk about this because I just saw her jump up.
So I will add a couple of things to this. First, I just want to thank Mr. Tebow for really kind of taking the reins on this MCAS. I've had a lot of other things that I have been had my hands in, and so I was really appreciative of him taking this on. I have a couple things to say about the science. The other thing we have to remember is that science, by and large, is a hands-on activity, and the science scores across the state took a decline. And I really do believe that a large reason for that is we had a couple of years where we weren't allowed to put our hands on anything, right? So the other thing we have to remember is our kids were shifting their learning and the way that they were learning from doing hands-on activities and experiments and getting in an understanding to really having to glean that information out of a textbook, from videos, from Mystery Doug, if you know anything about elementary science, he's the man at the moment. And so the other thing, you know, the kids are only tested in 5th and 8th grade. So the test in a high school, obviously, the test is a compilation of the topics that they would have learned over those years. So we have to remember the modality and the way that they were learning was shifted. And to Dr. Saber-McGuire's point, it was shifted away from something that we had already kind of created ourselves. So we haven't really gone through, our science team is going to go through that curriculum revision process and be looking for some high quality research-based instructional materials in the area of science. Because it is an area of the curriculum that, you know, post-pandemic, we were worried about our kids reading and their math, and we did a lot of integration of social studies and science into those areas. But science also needs to stand alone and be able to be a subject that we teach and talk about how to integrate the ELA and the math into science, right? It's sort of a reciprocal relationship. And so we have to look at all of those things, but also remember that our kids are learning in new and different ways, and we have to make sure that we have the resources and the curriculum materials that reflect that, and give them that solid building block, because that test that they take in 5th grade and 8th grade in high school is not just on that 1 year of information. It's a compilation of information all the way across.
So I'll just close by saying I don't disagree, but right, it is the only area where we fall below the median as compared to Bristol County and to other districts. And so I just think it's something that, Mr. Tebow said, we really focused on this and we really improved. I can't remember what it was. I think maybe 10th grade ELA. And I hope that moving forward that the science, curriculum, the integration and the testing, because there is something going on there. And that is nothing about our educators. I mean, I know all of our educators, they are really great. In this area. My kids took a ton of science classes. They love their science classes. They were really good classes. But, I'm hopeful, given too, right, how many students want to go into STEM fields, to make sure that our students are ready and adequately prepared to enter into top-level universities in those fields. That's it.
Thank you. Anyone else? I guess my only, I know that in one of my previous roles, policy and advocacy, I know that there's some legislation that is pending for the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education to take the data that we provide them and to publish it in a way that allows for cross-tabulation and really getting into the nitty-gritty around different groups of students, so that at any rate, we provide that data to them. And I'm just curious in terms of lumping the high-need students, students with disabilities, students with socioeconomic, are we able to, I heard somebody there, drill down to the nitty-gritty? Because I know we give that data to DESE, and hopefully DESE will then publish it for folks to really make some more equitable decisions in their planning.
They do publish it.
Okay.
At some point, it becomes like trying to take a drink of water out of a fire hose, though, right? Because there is so much data that you can get lost in it, right? So that's why you notice we grouped the grades 3 through 8. We could be here all night. We can go grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, same for our student subgroups. By the grade level, like there is so much data, and the Department of Ed does publish it. So I guess the answer to your question is absolutely, there's no shortage of data coming from the Department of Ed.
And we are, as a district, examining that data by subgroup.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of your question.
It is,
And that
yeah.
is happening at the school level.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This was great.
Thank you. I do have one question, I'm not sure. One last one. Are we internally benchmarking students in science anywhere, using any kind of benchmark assessments?
So yes, we do. The answer is yes. We do, at least at the high school level. The biology team, all of the teams really, have common benchmark assessments that they give, that they compare results on. So yes, and as I shared, each teacher was looking at their own data, or were about to be looking at their own data a week or so ago when I met with Mrs. Larson, and looking at the major strands, ecology, evolution, there were 2 others, and so really taking a focused look at how our students performed by standard, if you will.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tebow. Nice, really wonderful job. Again, we know we have work to do, so this is really just a snapshot of how we did as a school district, and there's a lot to be proud of in there. And at the same time, we're having conversations all the time about how do we get better, because it's always our goal to be better than the year before. Because when we say we, we're talking about our students and our students' performance levels. So we'll continue to focus on that. You asked about benchmarks. I love that question. And, at this point at the elementary level, we aren't benchmarking students in science, and that's something that we need to take a look at. And again, going back to Dr. Jenkins' question about resources, we do need to commit to some instructional resources in the district, and science is definitely a priority. So do you want me to just keep
Please
going?
continue, yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
So just a couple of things that I know I'm a broken record, but Kimberly Redlawn will be joining us November 20th as our new Assistant Director of Student Support Services, and she's going to come and introduce herself. So she's going to be like, this person we've been talking about for a number of months now. She is going to be here with us on the 20th. And again, the broken record is we continue to seek applicants for educational support professionals. That is going to be ongoing throughout the year, and we're encouraging our viewers, our residents, if you know somebody, please encourage them to apply to those positions because they're truly needed. And again, the same thing for our substitute situation. As far as climate and culture, I had mentioned at the last meeting that I'm still working toward meeting with each of the school districts, PTOs. I've been able to do just about all of them, meet with them on an ongoing basis. I have the Quinn coming up, but remember the main goal there is not only to meet with folks and get to know people and what the individual schools' areas of focus are, but also out of this to create a superintendent pack that will be accessible for school folks, parents across the district. And similarly, we're doing the same thing with our educators. Today, Katie Paveo and I were at the Quinn School meeting with the school's certified staff just to talk to them again about the superintendent entry planning and how their voice is so important and will impact the results of that entry planning and how we're really going to need them to help to inform us as to what our next steps are. Katie Paveo just mentioned that she's been busy and she's had her hands in lots of different things, so I want to acknowledge that work that's been done not only by Ms. Paveo, but also it's our central office staff, Jen Shia Mashad, who has been out in the hotels working to register our newcomer children, and we have, I would say at this point, 26 as of Wednesday, right, but 24 to 26 students that have joined the Dartmouth Public Schools. I have to say I'm incredibly heartened to see the welcome that these children, these students have received from each of the schools. We've been in constant contact with our school leaders and hearing from them that the teachers have been thrilled to welcome new children into their school, into their classroom communities. The children have also been equally welcoming. We've been able to purchase little pocket translators so that when our students enter school, they have, I think it's about this big, but they have, and I think we've got lanyards on them now. Not yet, but we're working on it so that our youngest student, was that Mr. Oliver, did you help us with that? Thank you.
Yes,
Okay. So those are going to be really helpful. But again, many of these students, not all of them, but many of them are learning to speak English. Our principals, our teachers, our EL teachers, I want to tell you, have gone above and beyond to welcome our students into school, and you should be proud of the work that they're doing. I know that it's not only about our students who are living in, the hotels, not the most ideal situation, but we all know that homelessness is a huge issue in our country. And so that is impacting the Dartmouth Public Schools. And what we've had to do is spend more time thinking about what the McKinney-Vento Act is, how it impacts our school district, and how under that act, we support our students and our families the way that not only the law dictates, but beyond what the law dictates, doing what's right for the families that are impacted and do fall under McKinney-Vento. So at our next school committee meeting, we are planning to have a presentation about McKinney-Vento so that we can not only educate the public, but just give everybody an update as to what the McKinney-Vento Act actually is about and how we are supporting our students in the Dartmouth schools. And so I just want to say, though, like on an upbeat note, and that is upbeat, right? So we have the Dartmouth Week here. this little newspaper is the best advertisement for the Dartmouth Public Schools, so I want to thank them. Because in it, I picked it up and I thought, well, this could say the Dartmouth Public Schools. So we have so much to celebrate here in Dartmouth, starting right with Dartmouth Junior NAB's top prize in math competition. And those are equally important things too. We have, you know, the obvious public celebration of our football team. We have our band. I know Mr. Nunes is definitely going to update you on where we are with that, so I won't steal any of that thunder. I've learned that along the way. We also have 2 students who have won an MIAA essay and multimedia contest. And that's a statewide contest, and there are only 2 awards in the state. Tabitha Cabral Elliott and Molly Cunningham are receiving this award Thursday night at Gillette Stadium, and they're receiving that award in front of 1,500 people. So we have our Dartmouth High School junior Stephen Way, who really wasn't expecting to win the invitational mathematics meet at Worcester Poly Institute on October 20th, but he did in fact win. So that is really incredible news and something I think we should all be celebrating. And then as I flip through, I see UMass Dartmouth in here as well, Dr. Jenkins, so lots to celebrate there. Dartmouth High School art hangs in the New Bedford Gallery X. So our students' artwork is being highlighted, celebrated in New Bedford's Gallery X. Has anybody been there yet?
I was
So
there
think-
this weekend.
Oh,
It
good.
was a great show. A
So I
lot
think
of
we need
Dartmouth High
to-
School artwork
Yeah,
there.
that's exactly what this says. We have the Potter, DeMello, Cushman, and Quinn elementary schools. I love this headline, scare up a good time at annual Halloween events. And so every one of our elementary schools celebrated with their students for Halloween. And I never really knew much about trunk or treating, but I've learned that Dartmouth is absolutely committed to trunk or treating and that there is quite a bit of participation in the community. And then you have, because we're not done, right? So then we have Dartmouth Fall Sports, qualifies for state tournaments. We have football. We know, we were at the football game Friday night, well, some of us were, and it was really exciting. It was a little bit of a nail biter. I wasn't too happy with that because I had just said something that my husband said, I think you just jinxed them. So now I've learned not to say a word until the game is over. We have field hockey. We had our boys soccer team, I think, played tonight, this
They
afternoon.
played at 4. I
Oh,
don't know the result.
Do we have any updates?
When I came by at 5 o'clock, it was nothing.
Yes.
I don't know, I didn't get a chance to see what quarter, that type of deal.
But our girls soccer team, we know, made it into the tournament, and I think they lost 1-0. Yes, but still something to be celebrated. And then, of course, we have the Dartmouth High School Marching Band, which I love this, sweeps the regional competition at Rutgers. And I know Mr. Nunes is going to talk about what that experience is about. And the reason that I share all of this with you is because we talk about a lot of important and serious topics here. Not that these aren't important and serious, but these are really the things that we celebrate in the Dartmouth schools. And there's so much here to be grateful for. Wonderful student body, wonderful educators here supporting our students every day. And so, I mean, I know I'm excited to be the superintendent here. I know I'm out a lot because of it, but this is great because I love football. I love watching the band. The cheerleaders, by the way, they also just won their they just won a regional competition as well, and they're in another one this week. And so many of your athletes and your musicians and your scholars are being recognized for their work across the state, across the country. So that's pretty exciting.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I just want to thank you for your leadership during this time and the team in welcoming these new students, and your letter that you sent out to the community really set the tone for really talking about, the humanity in all of this. And so it really it was a source of pride to read that letter that you put out, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. I also want to acknowledge I really enjoy the little details, and I'm really enjoying the uniformity of the PowerPoint presentations. I don't know if it just, there's something to be said in that, really setting the tone and being that one Dartmouth, and so
Dartmouth.
that detail wasn't lost on me. And the only thing I have before I turn it over to my colleagues, and specifically Mr. Nunes to update us on the band, is that this Thursday will be a Special Ed Parent Advisory Council meeting at 6:30 at the Cushman School. And so that's all I'll share, and I'll move it on to my colleagues. Dr. Jenkins?
So I just want to follow up. Earlier this evening, we heard from Juniper, I believe her name was, asking us about the trays in our cafeteria. And I've been thinking about that a lot this whole meeting, and about how we think about sustainability in our district and what the efforts we undertake to do that. Many districts that are larger than us, that have more money than us, have a person to do those sort of thing, right? That might report to Mr. Kiley, who's a one-man band over there. But we don't. At the same point in time, I think her comments point out how kids, young people in particular, really care about this, as we all should. They're leading the way on this, and I think we as a committee and as a school district should recognize that and sort of bring them into the fold and have conversations about this. So I'm wondering if we could maybe put this on our agenda for a future meeting, and maybe DeMello could reach out to, we don't have Juniper or her mom's contact information, but let them know that this is going to be on the agenda. And I just think it might behoove us to think about the ways that we are doing this, whether I just did a quick Google, and some schools have their own sustainability committee that looks at the operations within the schools. Some other communities do it townwide, and do it across the town in the schools. But I really, just want to thank Juniper for her comments tonight. It really got me thinking about this. And I hope it gets us all thinking about this. And I also hope it leads to some action. So
I appreciate you adding that, and I do want to say I want to thank Mr. Kiley. Ms. Juniper has been awesome. She wrote a letter, and I do have her mom's contact information. And Mr. Kiley had been responsive. I believe also the elementary school, and some plans around, and I should have been more detailed. I just didn't want to take up time during public comment. Responsive in recognizing the need that Juniper really spoke to, but I really appreciate your adding on that. I would like that on a future agenda, but I just want to thank Mr. Kiley for being responsive and talking about the planning to kind of get back to and do better in that area in terms of the reusable, specifically to the reusable, the ways in which we provided lunch during COVID and all of that. And so, yeah, I really appreciate her leadership. I couldn't do that at her age, for sure. But thank you. Mr. Nunes?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, Dr. Saban McGuire talked about the sports teams in the tournament, and still ongoing in that, so good luck. She talked about the cheerleaders. They took second the week before. They took first this past weekend in Norton. It was funny. The assistant coach is also a band parent, and I saw her in New Jersey, and I knew that they had, performed that day. I says, how'd you do? She says, we got second. I says, great. She came over to me after the band was done while we were packing up and everything, and she went, the judges made a mistake, we came in first. So I said, well, that's a good mistake to make. That's the best, those are the best ones to make type of deal. As far as the band, in all seriousness, and as it was in the Dartmouth Weekly, the Band of America Northeast Regional 2 weeks ago, the 28th of October, they won their class in the preliminaries, and then without any props, as our truck was broke down on the George Washington Bridge. Yeah, it's just in that, but the students being well taught and in the right mind and right frame and knew what they had to do, went out and performed anyway without them, and still did an excellent job. We got the props and everything, and they went out in finals and got an 86.6, and they took all the captions in both prelims and in finals. Went down to MetLife last week, this past Saturday, and they got a 98.05 for the 7th year in a row. They've, We took visual, music, overall, and overall performance and general effect. So we took 4 out of the, percussion, I should say. So we took 4 out of 5, categories type of deal. The color guide came in second. And this week, we're headed to the Lucas Oil Field Stadium in Indianapolis for national champions for Bands of America. The prelims are Friday, and then from there, if you're fortunate enough, you got the semifinals during the day on Saturday, and finals are on Saturday night with awards technically at the moment scheduled for 11:30. So it is anybody looking to watch it online, if you're not, that's not going. Bands of America does have a website, and you can subscribe to the online service, the online that they have. I can't for the life of me off the top of my head remember what it is, but there is a streaming service that you can subscribe to. So that's all I have. And we'll be back early Monday.
Thank you. I just lost my... Thank you, Mr. Nunes. Does anybody else have anything that they want to add? So our next meeting is...
November 20th.
Bueller. Go ahead.
November 20th at 6 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Nunes. And so with that, I will entertain a motion to go into executive session for discussion on non-instructional contracted service provider.
Yeah. Madam Chair, make a motion, we adjourn to executive session for further discussion of non-instructional contracted services and not return to open session.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Roll call.
Yes.
Oliver?
Yes.
Elizabeth Coughlin?
Yes.
John Nunes?
Yes.
Shannon Jenkins?
Yes.
Meeting's adjourned.
Great.
Ready, ready.